on a stormy night in a small town where everyone knows your name and your business. Olivia Rhodes did something that would forever alter her life. As the rain hammered against her truck's windshield, she spotted him. A soldier soaked to the bone, limping along the side of the road, his heavy backpack dragging him down. Most people would have kept driving, telling themselves that picking up a stranger in the middle of nowhere wasn't worth the risk. But Olivia didn't think twice. She pulled over, for someone like Olivia who lived a quiet, modest life. Helping a stranger was just part of who she was. She didn't need any grand gestures or recognition. She was used to flying under the radar. At 35, Olivia was familiar with the simple, often unnoticed struggles of life. The kind that don't make headlines but make up the heartbeat of small towns across America. After a long day working at the local bakery and caring for her daughter, Lily, Olivia was simply heading home when the storm and the sight of Jack stopped her in her tracks. She didn't ask questions or judge. Instead, she offered him the warmth of her truck, a safe place to rest, and a cup of tea. There was no hesitation in her decision, just a quiet instinct to help someone in need. As Jack climbed into the passenger seat, his clothes soaked and his body aching, Olivia could sense that he was more than just a soldier walking in the rain. His injuries were visible, but his exhaustion was deeper. There was something about him that made Olivia feel that he was not just asking for help. He was asking for a reminder that he still mattered. She didn't ask about the scars on his face or the pack on his back. She simply offered him warmth, both physically and emotionally. She gave him a blanket, a place on the couch to rest, and the comfort of being seen not as a stranger, but as a human being in need of kindness. And though he said nothing about it, Jack's deep sigh of relief spoke volumes. He wasn't just looking for a ride. He was looking for a moment of peace in a world that had forgotten how to care. That night, Jack slept on Olivia's couch, his breath steady, but his mind likely racing with memories of battles fought and losses endured. Olivia, on the other hand, went to bed quietly, knowing she had done something small but significant. The world would never know of this fleeting act of kindness, but to her, it meant more than she could express. When Jack left before sunrise, he did so without a word. But he left something behind, a medal, a silent symbol of his sacrifice. Little did Olivia know this simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change both of their lives forever. But for that one night, Olivia had done what many wouldn't. She had offered someone in need not just a ride, but a moment of dignity, of humanity. The storm had finally started to wane, its heavy downpour, replaced by the quiet hush of early morning. The soft hum of the heater was the only sound in the small trailer, as Olivia slowly woke her mind, still wrapped in the warmth of the night, before Jack was gone. No goodbye, no word of thanks. He had slipped out before the first rays of light touched the fields, just like a ghost fading into the morning mist. As Olivia made her way into the kitchen, her eyes fell on the empty couch where Jack had slept just hours earlier. The blanket was folded neatly, the couch cushion smoothed out as though it had never been occupied. There was no sign of his presence, no evidence of the soldier who had come in out of the rain, no trace of the pain he had silently carried with him. But then she noticed it. On the kitchen counter, resting quietly beside the sink, lay a small, unassuming item, a medal worn and tarnished, yet undeniably significant. It was the Purple Heart, a symbol of valor and sacrifice. A piece of Jack's past that he had carried through battlefields and hospitals, through pain and recovery. Olivia's heart skipped a beat as she stared at the medal, its bronze surface reflecting the dim morning light in a way that almost seemed to shimmer with stories untold. The moment felt surreal. It was as though the medal had been left there, not just as a token of gratitude, but as a gift, a message, a reminder Olivia had given Jack shelter from the storm, and in return, he had left a piece of himself behind. No explanation, no words, just the medal. She carefully reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned the object over in her hand. She had known Jack only for a few hours, but in that brief time she had glimpsed the weight of what he carried with him. The physical injuries were easy to see, the scar that ran down his face, the limp in his step, the way he cradled his side with a tenderness that suggested it was more than just fatigue. But there was something deeper, something unspoken that lingered in the quiet spaces between them. It was as though Jack had left behind more than just a medal. He had left a part of his soul, his struggle, His story, one that had been too painful to share, too heavy to carry alone. And in return, Olivia had offered him the one thing that no amount of money or medals could buy: kindness, pure and untainted. As she ran her thumb over the smooth surface of the metal, Olivia couldn't help but think about the soldier's silence. How many times had he walked through life carrying burdens that no one ever saw? How many times had he been forced to keep his pain hidden behind the walls of military discipline, the weight of his service and sacrifices, known only to those who had been through it? He had come to her broken, desperate, and silent, yet he had trusted her enough to take shelter in her home. In doing so, he had given her a piece of his past, a token of his gratitude, but more than that, a silent plea for recognition. As she placed the medal back down, her eyes wandered to the note he had left with it. There were no words of explanation, no heartfelt thank you, only a quiet, simple gesture. But the silence spoke volumes. It was a gesture of respect, of recognition, and of an unspoken understanding that sometimes no words are needed. Olivia had seen him, not just the soldier, not just the man with the scars and the limp, but the person who had endured too much and asked for nothing in return. That medal, that Purple Heart, was more than just a military decoration. It was a symbol of everything Jack had been through, everything he had lost, and everything he had fought for. And yet it was more than just a gift. It was a message that Olivia would carry with her long after Jack had disappeared from her life. It was a reminder that the smallest acts of kindness, those that go unnoticed, those that are given without expectation, can create ripples that stretch far beyond the moment. Sometimes the most profound impact is made not by grand gestures, but by the quiet acts that seem insignificant in the moment. Olivia's life had been a careful balance of hard work and sacrifice. As a single mother in a small town, her days were filled with endless chores, and her nights were spent trying to keep her world together. But despite her tireless efforts, the storm of financial instability was closing in, and the heavy weight of impending foreclosure hung over her like a dark cloud. Her father's house, the one she had grown up in, the one she had inherited with more repairs than walls, was now on the brink of being taken away. The mortgage payments had been missed. The interest had risen, and the bills piled up in a way she could no longer ignore. Olivia had done everything she could to stretch every dollar, to cut corners wherever possible, but there was only so much she could do. The bakery job paid barely enough to cover the essentials, and her side hustle at the farmer's market barely helped with groceries. She had already sold everything she could, the jewelry her mother had left her. The few keepsakes from her childhood that were worth anything but nothing seemed to stem the tide. Every day she woke up to the same stress, the same overwhelming sense of hopelessness. She kept a smile on her face at work, pretending that everything was fine. She even managed to make her daughter Lily believe that everything would be okay. But deep down, Olivia knew it was all falling apart. The house that had once been filled with warmth and memories was now nothing more than a sinking ship, and she didn't know how to stop it from going under. Then came the letter. It arrived one gloomy afternoon, tucked in between the stack of overdue bills and collection notices. Olivia didn't recognize the handwriting on the envelope, but she felt a strange pull as she opened it. The paper inside was simple, unadorned, but the message it carried hit her like a bolt of lightning. "You reminded me I still mattered." It was from Jack, the soldier she had helped that night. The one she had taken in without a second thought had sent her a letter. A short, simple sentence that carried more weight than any lengthy correspondence could. Jack, a man she barely knew, had written to her in the midst of her own despair, and his words cut through the fog of her crisis like a beacon of light. Olivia had never expected anything in return for the kindness she had shown Jack. She had given him a ride in the storm, offered him a warm drink, and let him sleep on her couch. She had done it because it felt right, because, as her father had once told her, if you see someone who looks like they've been walking along and no one's bothered to stop, maybe you're meant to be the one who does. It wasn't about expecting anything in return. It was about doing what she could when she could. But now, this simple note, "You reminded me I still mattered," was a lifeline. The words were so much more than just a thank you. They were a reminder of the quiet power of compassion, the strength that could come from simply being seen. Jack had been struggling too, in ways Olivia couldn't even begin to understand. Yet in his darkest moment, when he had no one else, it was her kindness, her simple act of seeing him as a person, rather than just a wounded soldier, that had given him a reason to keep going. As Olivia read the letter over and over, her mind began to race. She had been so focused on trying to survive on keeping the house on, making sure Lily had everything she needed, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to matter. She had poured every ounce of energy into maintaining appearances, into keeping the illusion that everything was fine, when in reality, her world was crumbling. But Jack's words sparked something in her. They reminded her that her life, though far from perfect, still had meaning. She wasn't just going through the motions. She wasn't invisible. She mattered. Her kindness mattered. And even though it felt like the walls were closing in, even though it seemed like everything was slipping through her fingers, she still had the power to change her story. The letter was a turning point, a moment of clarity in a time of despair. Olivia realized that while she couldn't control everything, she could control how she responded to the challenges she faced. She could keep fighting. She could find a way forward. She wiped the tears from her eyes, feeling a surge of determination she hadn't felt in months. She wasn't going to let this crisis define her. She wasn't going to let the bank take her home without a fight. She had too much to lose, too much to give, and she had already proven that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could have the biggest impact with renewed resolve. Olivia picked up the phone. She dialed the credit union and asked for an extension, explained her situation, and pleaded for more time. It wasn't much, but it was a step. She called every possible person she could think of for help trying to find a way to delay the foreclosure. It wasn't easy, and there were many moments when it felt hopeless. But Olivia refused to give up. She had a daughter who needed her a home she couldn't bear to lose, and now she had a reason to keep pushing forward, the simple reminder from Jack that she still mattered. Days turned into weeks, and Olivia found herself working harder than ever. She put in extra hours at the bakery, took on more shifts at the farmer's market, and sold anything she could that had any value. She even started reaching out to local organizations, explaining her situation, and seeing if they could help. Slowly but surely, things began to shift. She found out about a veteran support fund that could assist with mortgage payments. She talked to her boss at the bakery who was willing to help with a loan, and just when she thought it was all over, when the deadline was drawing near, she received another letter, this time from a group that had heard her story. They had seen her kindness to Jack, and now they were offering to help her with the mortgage to save her home. The battle wasn't over, but it was a victory. Olivia's world had started to shift in ways she couldn't have predicted. What had once seemed like an insurmountable crisis had now become a challenge she could face with a little help from her community, and the quiet reminder that kindness, even in its smallest form, could change lives. Jack had sent her a note that reminded her she mattered, and through that he had given her the strength to find her way through the storm. Now it was Olivia's turn to pay that kindness forward, not just to herself, but to the people who had helped her when she needed it most. Because sometimes the smallest gestures are the ones that make the biggest difference. And with each step forward, she was reminded that even in the darkest moments, kindness can be the spark that ignites change. It had been weeks since Olivia had last seen Jack. The memory of that rainy night when she had offered him a ride without asking questions still lingered in her mind like a quiet whisper. She had no expectation of hearing from him again. After all, their brief encounter had been a fleeting moment, one that she had done without any thought of reward or recognition. But life, as it often does, had a way of surprising her when she least expected it. One evening, as Olivia was preparing dinner for Lily, she heard a knock at the door. At first, she thought it was just another evening visitor, perhaps one of her neighbors or a late delivery. But when she opened the door, she was met with an unexpected sight. There, standing on her porch, was Jack. But this time, he wasn't the weary soldier she had picked up that night in the storm. This time, he was dressed in full military attire, his uniform sharp and pristine, his posture as steady as ever. Behind him, two men stood in silence, their expressions formal, their eyes alert. One was wearing the stripes of a master sergeant, while the other had the insignia of a captain. Olivia blinked in disbelief. The quiet soldier she had helped was now standing before her in full dress uniform, surrounded by military officers. The weight of the moment seemed to settle on her shoulders as she took in the scene. Her heart raced and a sense of confusion filled her. What was going on? Jack. She whispered, her voice thick with surprise. He gave a small nod, but this time there was no limp. No wounded soldier in need of rest. He looked different, stronger, more composed. "Evening, Olivia," he said quietly, his voice steady yet carrying an undeniable reverence. For a moment, Olivia just stood there staring at him. The memories of their brief encounter, the quiet moments in her home, the strange feeling of connection they had shared all rushed back to her. It seemed impossible that this was the same man, yet here he was standing before her not alone, but accompanied by two military officers. She stood frozen in place as Jack slowly stepped forward, holding an envelope in his hand. "It's long overdue," he said, his tone sincere but guarded. "But it's only the beginning." Olivia was speechless. What was he talking about? What was in that envelope? Jack turned to the two officers who stood behind him. The captain took a step forward and extended his hand. "Ms. Rhodes, I'm Captain Stephen Marks, United States Army," he said with a respectful tone. "We're here on behalf of the Office of Veteran Community Engagement and the 5th Special Recon Unit. We'd like to speak with you if now is a good time." Olivia blinked in disbelief, her mind racing to catch up with the moment. She had no idea what was happening or why these military officers were at her doorstep, but the seriousness of their presence told her that this was no ordinary visit. "Please come in," she said, stepping aside to allow them into her home. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the officers entered their presence, a reminder of the weight of the situation. Lily, her daughter, appeared at the doorframe, her eyes wide with curiosity. Olivia quickly reassured her. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just some visitors." Lily looked at the men with a mixture of awe and uncertainty, but Olivia gently guided her back to her room, telling her it was time for bed. As the men settled around the kitchen table, Olivia's heart was still pounding in her chest. Jack handed her the envelope with a gentle but firm grip. She took it, feeling the weight of it in her hands, but she couldn't bring herself to open it just yet. Instead, she looked at Jack, trying to make sense of the situation. "Jack, what is this?" she asked, her voice soft but with an edge of confusion. He gave her a long look, his eyes filled with a quiet gratitude. "What you did that night helping me when no one else would, it didn't go unnoticed," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You reminded me that I still mattered, and that means more than you know." Olivia felt a lump form in her throat, but she held it back. She didn't understand why Jack was here, or why he was with these men, but the sincerity in his words touched her deeply. The captain spoke up again, his voice calm but firm. "Ms. Rhodes, your story was shared, and it reached the highest levels. Your kindness, your willingness to help a stranger in need, it made an impact, and now we are here to honor you." Olivia's mind struggled to comprehend what she was hearing. Honor me. She had only offered a ride to a man in need. She had given him a warm bed for the night, a cup of tea, and a sense of comfort in the middle of his own darkness. She hadn't done anything special, nothing deserving of honor. But as she looked at the faces around her, she realized that what had seemed like an insignificant act of kindness to her had meant something far greater to others. The captain continued, "On behalf of the Department of Defense, we are here to present you with a certificate of community honor for your exceptional compassion and bravery. You've been recognized as an honorary civilian contributor to veteran resilience and recovery initiatives." Olivia's heart skipped a beat as the captain slid a formal letter across the table. She could hardly believe what she was reading. This was real. She had been recognized for something so simple, something she had done out of instinct. It was overwhelming. But that wasn't all. The master sergeant, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward and placed another document beside the first. "This one," he said, "was personally requested by Jack." Olivia's breath caught in her chest as she picked up the second letter. It was from a non-profit organization, a military foundation she had never heard of, and it contained one simple sentence that changed everything. This letter confirms full acquisition and forgiveness of mortgage debt associated with the property at 412 County Road, Millfield, Pennsylvania. Her home. Her father's home. Saved tears welled up in Olivia's eyes as the reality of what was happening began to sink in. She had no words to express the gratitude she felt. Jack had somehow in some way arranged for her mortgage to be paid off, a gesture that went beyond anything she could have imagined. Jack looked at her, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "Because what you did that night wasn't just about me," he said softly. "It was a reminder that somewhere in the world quiet kindness still exists and that matters to all of us." Olivia sat in stunned silence, the enormity of the moment pressing down on her. Her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. But in that quiet room surrounded by these men who had come to honor her, she realized that her act of kindness had set in motion a ripple of goodwill that would continue to grow long after this moment. As the evening drew to a close, Jack gave her one final gift, a challenge. Coin, a symbol of valor and recognition within the military. "You didn't ask for recognition," Jack said, handing it to her. "But you've earned it." The coin felt heavy in her hand, but it was more than just a token. It was a reminder of the power of kindness. The kind of kindness that changes lives even in the darkest of times. Olivia had always lived her life with a quiet sense of purpose. Raised in a modest home, working long hours at the local diner, and caring for her daughter, Lily, she had never sought recognition for the simple acts of kindness that defined her. Yet one rainy night, when she chose to stop and offer help to a stranger in need, she had no idea that her small gesture would change not just one life, but many. When Jack Reynolds, the wounded soldier she had helped, returned to her doorstep weeks later, Olivia's world shifted in ways she could never have imagined. This time, he wasn't the same man she had driven through the rain. The broken, disheveled figure Jack stood before her in full military attire, accompanied by two officers who bore formal expressions. Olivia was stunned, unsure of what was happening or why she was being honored. Jack's words echoed in her mind. "You reminded me I still mattered." That was when she first learned that her act of kindness had been noticed. Jack had shared her story, and somehow it had reached the highest levels of military command. In a quiet, understated way, her small, selfless action had become a beacon of compassion, a reminder that kindness still had a place in a world often consumed by chaos. The officers presented Olivia with a certificate of community honor from the Department of Defense. The certificate recognized her exceptional compassion, bravery, and her quiet service to a wounded veteran. Olivia was overwhelmed. She had never imagined that something as simple as offering a ride to a stranger could lead to such recognition. But the honor didn't stop there. Jack, with the help of the veteran community, had arranged for something far more life-changing. With a few words of explanation, the captain handed Olivia another letter, this one from an anonymous military veterans non-profit organization. To Olivia's astonishment, the letter confirmed that the foundation had fully acquired and forgiven her mortgage debt, saving her family's home. The news hit her like a wave, and she struggled to comprehend what was happening. Her home, the very place where her daughter Lily had grown up. The home she had fought to keep had been saved. The mounting debts and looming foreclosure, the constant pressure to keep a roof over Lily's head, all seemed to fade away in that moment. Jack had quietly worked behind the scenes, using the network of veterans and supporters to secure a future for her family. Olivia's heart was overwhelmed with gratitude. She had been living on the edge of financial ruin, barely scraping by. Every day she fought to keep things together, trying to make sure that Lily's world stayed stable, despite their struggles. Now she could breathe again. Her house was safe. Her future was secure, and it was all because of Jack and the network of people who had heard her story and decided to act. "Because what you did that night wasn't just about me," Jack had said, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. "It was a reminder that somewhere in the world, quiet kindness still exists, and that matters to all of us." Olivia couldn't believe it. She hadn't asked for any of this. She hadn't even known that Jack was in such a desperate place when he'd walked into her life. She simply saw a man in need. Someone who was clearly hurting, and she offered what she could. A cup of tea, a place to rest, a warm bed for the night. It wasn't extraordinary, just human decency. Yet here she was, the recipient of a gift she had never expected, not just the forgiveness of her mortgage, but a new sense of hope. As the officers left her home, Jack gave her one final token, a challenge coin, a symbol of respect and recognition in the military. "You didn't ask for recognition," Jack had said, placing it in her hand, "but you've earned it." Olivia held the coin tightly, feeling its weight in her palm. It wasn't just a token of military honor. It was a reminder that her simple act of kindness had not gone unnoticed. In the weeks that followed, Olivia's life began to change in ways that went beyond financial relief. She was no longer just Olivia, the quiet woman in the small town of Millfield scraping by. She had become a symbol of kindness, a living testament to the fact that even the smallest act of compassion could have far-reaching consequences. She had made a difference in Jack's life, and in doing so, she had inspired a community to care, to pay it forward, and to remember that kindness was still alive. With her mortgage forgiven, Olivia could finally begin to focus on what truly mattered. She poured her energy into her family, into Lily's future, and into the community that had come to recognize her. And as she looked back at the journey that had brought her here, she realized that the real reward wasn't the certificate, the coin, or even the saved home. The real reward was knowing that even in a world filled with uncertainty, her choice to act with kindness had sparked something much bigger. Something that would continue to grow quietly in the hearts of those who remembered. The quiet transformation that Olivia Rhodes underwent was subtle yet profound. She had spent most of her life quietly moving through the days, keeping her head down and focusing on the simple joys of motherhood and the steady rhythm of her job at the diner. But everything changed the moment she chose to stop her truck in the rain and offer help to a stranger, a wounded soldier named Jack Reynolds. What she had done in that moment felt so instinctive, so human, and yet it had triggered a chain reaction that would completely alter the course of her life. At first, Olivia didn't fully understand the magnitude of what her act of kindness had set in motion. Jack's return with the uniformed officers, his recognition of her in front of the Department of Defense, and the complete forgiveness of her mortgage debt by an anonymous veterans organization were overwhelming. Yes, but they were also just the beginning. The true change in Olivia's life was not just about financial security. It was about a deeper understanding of herself, her place in the world, and her role in the community. Before the rainstorm, Olivia's world had been small but manageable. She worked hard at Dottie's diner, where most days were the same. She took care of Lily, her daughter, and stayed in close contact with her aging mother. She never thought much about her own needs, and rarely did she think beyond the confines of her own little town of Millfield. But after Jack's return and the doors he had opened for her, Olivia began to see a broader picture. One in which her actions, even the smallest ones, could have an impact far beyond her immediate world. The change within Olivia didn't happen overnight, but it was gradual, steady, and deep. She began to understand that the quiet kindness she had shown Jack that night had not only helped him, but had also called something within her into existence. She was no longer just a mother, a diner worker, or a woman struggling to make ends meet. She was someone who had made a difference, and she realized that she wanted to keep doing it. It wasn't about the recognition or the financial security, although both of those things were life-changing. It was about the purpose that had slowly awakened within her, like a seed planted in the quiet corners of her heart. The certificate of community honor from the Department of Defense and the challenge coin from Jack were tangible symbols of that purpose, but they were only the beginning. What truly mattered was the work Olivia began to do, the connections she began to make, and the ways in which she began to give back to the community that had always been her home. Jack's story had touched her deeply. His struggles, his silence, and his scars had made her realize that there were many more people like him who had been overlooked, forgotten, or misunderstood. She began to see the veterans who came into the diner and the people in her small town, not just as faces passing by, but as individuals with their own stories, their own struggles, and their own need for kindness and understanding. Olivia's act of compassion toward Jack had opened her eyes to a whole new world, one that wasn't defined by financial hardships or daily routines, but by the deep connections between people and the power of community. When the invitation arrived, extending an offer to become a community advisor for the Veteran Resilience Network, Olivia was hesitant at first. She wasn't qualified by any formal measure. She didn't have a degree in psychology or social work, and she had never served in the military. But as she sat with the letter in her hands, she realized that perhaps her qualifications weren't what mattered. What truly mattered was her heart, her willingness to listen, and her ability to show up for others. So she accepted the offer. Her new role as a community advisor wasn't glamorous. It wasn't about public recognition or accolades. Instead, it was about small, quiet acts of service, listening to veterans share their stories, helping them navigate the difficulties of post-service life, and offering a steady presence of support. Olivia learned to lead meetings, to speak from her heart, and to give others the space they needed to heal. She didn't have the answers, but she was there, and that was enough. As time went on, Olivia grew into this new role with a quiet strength. Her community work began to take root, and she found herself becoming more involved in local initiatives, connecting with people in ways she never had before. She helped organize community dinners, raised awareness for veterans' issues, and began working closely with the families of fallen soldiers and veterans struggling with post-traumatic stress. Although she had no formal qualifications, Olivia's impact was undeniable. The people who came to her for advice or support didn't care about her degrees or certifications. What they cared about was that she listened, that she cared, and that she had walked through her own struggles with grace and determination. Her story had become a beacon of hope not just for Jack, but for others in the community, who had quietly fought battles of their own. In a sense, Olivia had come to embody the very thing she had once been searching for: purpose. But it wasn't the kind of purpose that shouted for attention or recognition. It was the kind of purpose that came from within, the kind that grew in quiet places, nurtured by empathy and the desire to make a difference. Olivia had found a deeper meaning in her life, one that didn't depend on circumstances, but on the choices she made every day to show up for others. And so as the seasons changed and Olivia continued to serve her community, she realized that the transformation she had undergone wasn't just about the external accolades or the financial security she had gained. It was about the internal change, the quiet realization that even the smallest acts of kindness had the power to change lives, and that in turn had the power to change the world. The act of kindness that Olivia Rhodes had extended to Jack Reynolds that rainy night had sparked something much larger than she could have ever anticipated. What began as a simple, quiet gesture, a ride for a wounded soldier in need, unleashed a ripple effect that not only transformed her own life, but also touched the lives of many others in her small town of Millfield, Pennsylvania. As Olivia's life began to shift in the wake of Jack's return, her purpose became clear. She wasn't just a woman who had been through hardships and come out stronger. She was now a conduit for change, a living testament to the power of compassion. The recognition she received from the Department of Defense for her selfless act was a turning point, but it wasn't the accolades that motivated her. What mattered more was the deeper understanding she had gained, that small, quiet acts of kindness could have a profound, lasting impact on individuals and communities. In the months following Jack's visit, Olivia began to pour herself into community initiatives, organizing dinners, support groups, and memorial gardens for veterans. These efforts were not about gaining recognition or fame. They were about creating spaces where people could find support, understanding, and healing. Olivia had learned through her experience with Jack that some wounds were too deep to heal with just words, but a simple act of kindness could help begin the process. She organized community dinners, simple gatherings where veterans, their families, and local residents could come together over shared meals. It wasn't about throwing grand events or making a spectacle of her efforts. It was about fostering connections, offering a safe space for veterans to talk about their experiences, and giving them a place where they could feel valued. These dinners quickly became a staple in Millfield, and the small town began to feel a little less isolated, a little more connected. Olivia's work didn't stop with the dinners. She was determined to leave a lasting impact, something tangible that would serve as a reminder of the kindness that had transformed her life. And so she set her sights on a new project, a memorial garden, a peaceful space where veterans could reflect, heal, and honor the sacrifices made by those who came before them. The garden, planted with lilacs and other fragrant flowers, became a symbol of remembrance and renewal. It wasn't just a physical space. It was a place where the community came together to support one another, and where Olivia's quiet brand of leadership shone. But perhaps the most telling example of Olivia's commitment to giving back was the small garden she started behind her house. The sign was simple, handwritten, and quietly placed at the entrance. Free produce for any veteran. No questions, no limits. There were no flashy advertisements, no big announcements, just a simple act of generosity. Olivia had witnessed firsthand how the smallest gestures could make a difference, and she wanted to create a space where veterans and their families could receive something without feeling indebted or obligated. It was a place where they could take what they needed. No questions asked. No strings attached. The garden quickly became a symbol of Olivia's approach to kindness. Humble, unassuming, but deeply impactful. Word spread throughout Millfield, and veterans from surrounding towns began to visit. They came not just for the fresh produce, but for the reminder that someone cared. That someone saw them as more than just their service. It was a small thing, a garden filled with tomatoes, cucumbers, and squash. But to the men and women who walked past her gate, it was a symbol of something much greater, a community that was willing to give without asking for anything in return. The impact of Olivia's garden went beyond just the veterans. Her small act of generosity had sparked a wider movement of kindness and support. People in the town began to pay it forward, offering their own resources to help others. Some started their own gardens, others offered rides, meals, or simply a listening ear. The sense of community in Millfield began to grow stronger, and it wasn't because of some grand initiative or an organized program. It was because one person had chosen to make a difference and in doing so had inspired others to do the same. Olivia's efforts were never about recognition. She didn't seek validation or applause. Instead, she focused on the quiet power of small, consistent acts of kindness. Her garden, the dinners, the memorial garden. These were all ways in which she nurtured the growth of something much bigger than herself. She had created a space where people felt seen, where their struggles were acknowledged, and where their contributions were valued. Over time, Olivia's work reached beyond the borders of Millfield veterans. From other towns began to visit, drawn by the reputation of her kindness and the way she had built a community that prioritized connection over division. Olivia's story became one of quiet heroism, not because of her accomplishments, but because of her unwavering commitment to helping others. She had learned through her own trials and triumphs that true change doesn't always come from grand gestures or public recognition. It comes from the small everyday acts that, when multiplied, have the power to change lives. As Olivia continued to serve her community, she saw the tangible results of her work. The veterans who came to her dinners, the families who benefited from her garden, and the people who found solace in the memorial garden, all of them were impacted by the kindness she had shared. But what was most remarkable was how her actions had inspired others to follow suit. The ripple effect of Olivia's kindness had spread far beyond her initial act, creating a community that was stronger, more connected, and more compassionate than ever before. In the end, Olivia understood something deeply important. Kindness isn't about what you give, but about what you create. By choosing to plant seeds of compassion, she had cultivated a garden of change, a garden where people didn't just take. They gave, they supported, and they thrived together. And that, Olivia realized, was the true power of kindness. Jack Reynolds had already left an indelible mark on Olivia Rhodes's life. Their first encounter had been a moment of quiet, unexpected kindness on a rainy night when he, a wounded soldier, had found solace in her humble home. Since then, their paths had crossed again and again, each time bringing something new: gifts of support, compassion, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to give without expectation. But when Jack returned once more, this time with a simple but powerful symbol, the meaning of their connection transcended the boundaries of their individual lives and became a part of something much larger. Jack, now back in uniform, stood before Olivia once again. But this time there was no rain, no limping soldier asking for a ride. He was dressed in civilian clothes, simple jeans, and a flannel shirt, yet still bearing the aura of someone who had seen and experienced more than most could understand. His posture was steady, no longer weighed down by the physical pain of his injuries, and his eyes, though still filled with the depth of what he had endured, were clearer, more focused. But it wasn't his appearance that captured Olivia's attention. It was the small gesture he made as he handed her something precious. With quiet reverence, Jack presented her with a small metal coin, a badge shaped like a seed. It was simple, yet heavy with meaning. A symbol of the Kindness Initiative. A movement that had taken root as a result of their shared experiences. The seed represented growth. The quiet, unnoticed actions that could over time create ripples of change, spreading kindness wherever they were planted. "What's this?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack smiled, his eyes warm with a mixture of gratitude and understanding. "It's part of something bigger now," he said, "the Kindness Initiative. It's a way to remind people that even the smallest acts can change lives, the way you changed mine that night." Olivia. The weight of his words settled in her chest. She hadn't set out to change anyone's life. She hadn't even expected a thank you from him. She had only acted on a quiet impulse to help someone in need, to do what felt right in the moment. But the gesture had been far more significant than she had ever realized. As Jack spoke, Olivia felt the sense of connection between them deepen, as if their shared experience had created an invisible bond that transcended the circumstances that had brought them together. Jack was leaving again, this time to take on a new role in Washington, a position that would allow him to contribute to the kindness initiative on a national scale. Yet despite the physical distance that would separate them, Olivia understood that their bond wouldn't be broken. It was something that had been forged in the quiet moments between two strangers, and it would continue to grow just like the seed Jack had given her. "I have to go," Jack said, his voice steady but laced with an unspoken sadness. "But I'll always carry this with me, and I hope you will too." Olivia looked down at the seed-shaped badge in her hand, feeling the weight of it in her palm. She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. Not out of sadness, but out of a deep sense of gratitude for Jack, for the lessons he had taught her, and for the way their paths had crossed in such an extraordinary way. As Jack turned to leave, Olivia's heart felt full. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but she knew that it had already changed her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. She had been a quiet witness to Jack's transformation, but in many ways, he had been a witness to hers as well. His act of kindness had led her to discover a purpose she hadn't known she was searching for, to be a part of something bigger than herself, to make a difference in her community, and to spread kindness wherever she went. Jack's departure wasn't the end of their story. It was just another chapter, a moment in time where the seed of kindness had been planted, ready to grow and spread to others. Olivia knew that the connection they shared would remain even as their paths diverged. And as she looked down at the small coin in her hand, she realized that the true power of kindness lay not in the recognition it received, but in the quiet, unnoticed acts that had the power to change the world, one small step at a time. As Jack walked away, Olivia could feel the weight of their shared journey, the bond that had been forged in the quiet moments of giving and receiving. She knew that their connection would continue to inspire her even when he was no longer physically present, and she would carry that seed of kindness with her, nurturing it, allowing it to grow and spread just as it had been meant to. Jack had taught her something invaluable, that sometimes the most powerful acts of kindness are the ones that go unseen, that spread quietly like roots beneath the surface. And now Olivia was ready to continue that journey, planting seeds of kindness wherever she could, knowing that even the smallest gesture could have a profound impact on the world. One ordinary day, as Olivia was going about her work, a stranger arrived at her doorstep. In his hands he held a folded envelope, its edges worn from travel. Without a word he handed it to her, and just as quickly as he came he left. When Olivia opened the envelope, she found something that stopped her in her tracks. A framed photograph of Jack standing at a podium in Washington, speaking into a microphone. Behind him, projected on a massive screen, was a quote that took her breath away. "She didn't ask. She just acted." Olivia's heart swelled with emotion as she read the words. It wasn't the recognition or attention that mattered to her. It was the reminder that her quiet act of kindness, picking up a stranger in the rain without question or hesitation, had rippled out, touching lives far beyond what she could ever imagine. Jack had never sought praise, and neither had she. Yet somehow the story of their encounter had become something larger, something that had transcended their individual lives and left behind a legacy of compassion. The photograph, the quote, and the memory of that rainy night became more than just symbols of one moment in time. They became a testament to the power of small acts of kindness and the profound impact they could have on the world. Olivia knew that she hadn't just changed Jack's life. She had helped to plant a seed of kindness that would continue to grow, one that would inspire others to act without asking, just as she had done. The story of Olivia and Jack teaches us that the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples that reach further than we can ever imagine. Olivia's decision to help a stranger without asking questions or expecting anything in return was a simple yet profound act of compassion. This story reminds us that in a world often dominated by noise and self-interest, the quiet, uncelebrated moments of care and empathy are what truly matter. In our daily lives, we may not always have the opportunity to make grand gestures, but we do have countless chances to offer kindness in small, meaningful ways. Whether it's helping a colleague in need, offering a listening ear to a friend, or simply showing compassion to a stranger, these acts can change lives. Just like Olivia, we may never fully understand the impact of our actions, but they can create a lasting legacy of goodwill. For those of us navigating the complexities of adult life, balancing careers, families, and responsibilities, it can be easy to overlook the significance of these quiet moments. But the story reminds us that kindness doesn't need recognition or applause. It is enough to know that through our actions we've made the world a little bit better just by showing up and caring. As Olivia's story proves, sometimes all it takes to change a life is a single selfless gesture.